Hey, this is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Dani Hart. I don't really know how to describe Dani. She's a growth mentor and advisor at Growth Mentor, which is a mentorship community and marketplace. She's working on digital growth and fundraising strategy with the American Battlefield Trust, and she also consults through her brand, Growth Gal, as well as teaches yoga and works on organic farms. So obviously, this was a great conversation. I've known Dani for years, since her days working as a growth master at growthhackers.com. And we've since become friends both online and IRL. And we both share love and interest in recovery, health and wellness, and general personal growth and optimization. Since your host came into this conversation tired and a bit burnt out, ironically from a vacation, we explored many of these recovery-related topics in this conversation. Listen through and you'll learn how to become a better, healthier, happier version of yourself and bring that to your job and become much more effective as well. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Dani Hart.
I think I was thinking about it the other day because I reached out or whatever, but I haven't, Alex was the last person that I had a business lunch meeting with.
Oh yeah. We were in New York right before the pandemic.
Right before everything started. I just moved there, just getting settled. And you were the last person that visited,
Did you were moving to, was it New Jersey or were you in New York?
I was in Jersey City, so just
really close, yeah,
trip away.
Did you book it down to Baltimore during the pandemic, or when did you head down?
Yeah, I had I moved to New Jersey, and then I was all right, I got a job teaching yoga. I'm ready to kick off this new lifestyle post working in tech and travel and all that good stuff. And then I I didn't know anybody during the pandemic or anything, so I lasted for about 5-6 months in Jersey City. And then I was just why am I doing this to myself? I will have a better life back home in Baltimore. So, I have all my friends already. I don't have to make new friends in a pandemic, that kind of stuff. So it's been really interesting, reintegrating back home. No one really talks about how challenging that is, but I think that's been the most challenging part of my life so far. Just being authentically myself around my family and friends that have known me forever. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially any move mid-pandemic, I feel is going to be an extra level of stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're completely out of tech, or what are you doing nowadays?
I joke about that, but I can never get away from it. So I have 3 different clients I'm working with primarily now. The American Battlefield Trust, I coordinate their digital fundraising. So any email or modal on the website, anything that will bring in more donors, or, just we have different campaigns that we run where we'll save battlefield land and then run different campaigns around that. So I'm on the digital side, which is great. So I do that part-time. And then I've got a couple of other clients. So Eternova I'm working with, so they're out of Austin, turning those ashes into diamonds. So I'm writing a lot about grief and really just looking at life and death in a different viewpoint of not different, but just more holistic of what does this mean for us, and how, when someone passes, how do we start a new chapter while we celebrate and honor their lives. So that's a lot of fun, very creative work for me. And then my last client is the growth mentor. So I am the mentor ambassador, meaning that I can help build up the mentor community and get to do what I love doing at Growth Hackers, which was the people side of things, just kind of being more involved in the community and the thought leaders in growth.
Can you describe Growth Mentor real quick?
Yeah. So it's a community where mentees can sign up and anybody can be a mentee, and it's really just focused on growth. So Foti, the founder, started it because he was the he was the head of growth at Euro VPS and was looking for help and just someone to bounce ideas off of, being in that space. And he could never find it, and he could read 20 articles, but like when he like actually got to talk to somebody, it was much more efficient. He got to like implement something that day. So he kind of started it on his own idea that more people needed that. And then we met up right after I had left Growth Hackers. He had contacted me to be a mentor, and was just like, hey, I want to expand this. And so we've teamed up in terms of like me trying to figure out how do we convert some of the Growth Hackers community over to Growth Mentor, just knowing that people learn different. And if they can talk to other people in the space and get their, plan looked at, or just holes poked in their own plan, or I guess it's the same thing, but yeah, it's just a good place for people to meet other people in growth and I don't know, learn, grow, bounce ideas.
So I've definitely, I resonate with that idea. I've always found that I like blog posts. You can find a good blog post. I write a lot of blog posts, and hopefully they're valuable, but, going to conferences for me, and going to like lunches all the time here in Austin, there's a lot of good marketers and like kind of, thought leaders here. I've always found one of those conversations, the right one, is worth 100 blog posts, because you get like the specific advice, which you alluded to, but then also there's something about the fact that it's a private forum. So I think when you're writing a blog post, like you have some what's in it for me purpose, right? Like you want traffic, or there's some, you want to look good, and it's like a case study or something like that. You're polishing over like the not so fun parts of it. Whereas like you get a personal conversation over lunch, over coffee or something like that, or through Growth Mentor. And you're going to get, for me, I feel like I get more honest advice sometimes.
Oh yeah. And that's what's beautiful about it. Like I have no problem showing up and giving the tough love to people that need to hear it. Like I'm not mean by any means, but I will question you and make you think about things so that it's not something that is going to be unsustainable. And I think that I have the benefit of having been at the center of Growth Hackers. I was talking to people in different companies, learning their growth strategies, helping them improve them for years. And so being able to now kind of keep that going, and through this pandemic, even like it's kind of evolved from growth of companies to growth of people. And I really focus now on getting people to really understand what their core values are, what their personality traits are, that make for strengths in the workplace, and how to relax. So it looks different based on kind of who approaches me. But for a lot of people, they end up having multiple calls with me, and that might be over the course of 3 months or something like that. It's pretty flexible. So I love that. But it's been really nice to just get out there and also be a mentee myself. Like I talk to so many mentors that I'm always learning like what they're doing and how they're approaching things. So it just kind of keeps me sharp in growth as well, even though I'm kind of on the perimeter these days.
So that's cool. You're advising and consulting for the company itself as well. You're also a mentor on the platform and also a mentee. So you're getting value from all sides and giving value as well.
Yep. And just a couple months ago, I got up to 100 reviews, which, everybody's always like, why do you do it for free? Because, until Growth Mentor like brought me on as the ambassador, I was doing it for free. Like, it's just like, whatever, like I've got the time to spare. It keeps me sharp, all these things. It's also my way of giving back. And I've realized that it's been tenfold. Like when I got those 100 reviews, they created a video for me of like what people said and how I've like made an impact on their career and everything. I'm just like, you cannot pay for this. Like, this is amazing. Like, I feel so good right now. I have like that video whenever I'm feeling bad. I'm just like, all right, I'll play the video. Right.
So I saw some of those reviews, and a lot of them were raving about more of the personal side of growth. So it seems like you talk a lot about burnout and recovery, healing. Would you say that's kind of how these sessions cater? Or, I mean, I'm sure it's a mix.
It's definitely mixed. I mean, there's the people that find me, they're like, I want to talk growth and growth hacking, and I want the hack, right? And I work with them because there's usually something that they can try right away that's going to have some kind of impact. But at the same time, they need to understand that growth is a process and it takes time and, intention about where you spend your energy and your effort, and also how are you always sprinting? Because if your team is always sprinting, like you will never, I won't say you'll never accomplish anything, but you'll need to take the reins in and learn from what the growth that's happening when you are sprinting so fast. And so I think that what I've learned is that growth, it starts, I think people's journey starts a lot of time through company growth, because they're like, oh, this is the hot thing. I was in marketing, now I'm in growth, whatever. But then it's a certain like type of mindset, right? The growth mindset that then makes this personal growth so much easier, I think, because you're used to kind of, okay, learning, going like, and it sucks when it's personal because it's like, wait, I did something wrong. But every time you make a mistake, you get better. And so it's all about mindset at the end of the day, like how you're approaching your own life, but also your own career and your own mission and vision that you have for yourself.
That's a funny connection. I've noticed it kind of going both ways. It's like the people who are really interested in biohacking and personal optimization and productivity tend to go into careers like growth and like conversion optimization and in general tech because of the similarity there. And then vice versa. You see a lot of tech influencers talking about like 8 sleep or meditation, or like everybody's got kind of a personal mindset as well in terms of like how they're trying to improve their life. And it could be on multiple dimensions. It could be like pure productivity, trying to like increase their output. And now I think there's a lot more of a focus on the recovery side, which is like, how do I have a well-balanced life? Like, how do I like carve out space for creativity and emotional expression? And it seems like that's now like the focus of companies, as well as the people who are doing the build, measure, learn cycle kind of on themselves.
For sure. And yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's just this positive feedback loop of like, okay, what are the inputs? What are the outputs? And let's just continue this cycle, because otherwise like life, I don't know, life's boring without that to me now.
Do you find that a lot of the people that approach you in this space, whether they're tech entrepreneurs or growth marketers, do you find that there's a pattern that trends towards, burnout and kind of overexertion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because it shows up so different for each individual. And what might look like burnout to me might not look like burnout to someone else. For me, I started getting like physical symptoms where I was getting migraines and like just had never had migraines before, and that was actually right around the time that you and I met. And I realized that there was a better path forward. Like I just knew I needed to make a change, and I did. And that was like a very intuitive thing for me to do. And probably because I have a background in, I went to school for marketing and environmental studies. So I was constantly looking at like marketing, how can we sell things and fix problems and all that. But at the same time, like there are a lot of problems already out there to fix on the environmental side. So like, let's be sustainable about how we approach these things. And so I think that's a unique, it kind of insight or bias to bring to the table. But I find that a lot of people are, burnout shows up as imposter syndrome, right? Where they're just overwhelmed and just like, can't even think about the idea of like trying something new right now. So I usually just work with people to kind of get them back to like what makes them uniquely them, and then help them build from there. And it's been so cool to just see like people's confidence rise through that process, because they realized they weren't, not confident. They were just overwhelmed and they weren't doing what they were meant to be doing. And so once they get that fix, it's like, oh, wow, this feels very different, but very good.
Do you think so? Burnout, you have such a good point here with burnout kind of exhibiting itself differently in different people. And for myself, like I never noticed when I am getting towards burnout. Like for me, it's very difficult to notice when I'm kind of overexerting myself. I think it's usually I start sleeping less well, and I'm really stressed, but also completely devoid of creativity. So I kind of feel bored and stressed at the same time. It's this really strange feeling. And then I'm like, all right, something's got to change. And then I'll usually like take a step back and figure out what that is. Do you think people can be burnt out from underexertion as well? Like, can you simply be bored and unfulfilled, or is that a different term entirely?
Definitely. I mean, burnout is really like when you're not being valued, appreciated, or you're overworked, overexerted. And I think that undervalued and underappreciated thing is really important, because, if you're just sitting there and you're in an unhealthy state, or you're stressed and all you're doing is scrolling, you're not fulfilling your values. You're sitting there and you're, if you don't fall for something, or if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that that's kind of where a lot of people are these days, that they're so stressed and overwhelmed, and they might not even know that like consciously, but their bodies, I mean, we've been through so much trauma in the past couple of years collectively as a society. And if you can't acknowledge that, then you are just going to be walking around with this heavy weight on you, instead of saying like, hey, we got to get through this. We got to find a better way. Let's address this. Let's stop scrolling. Let's do some of this hard work. But unfortunately, I think it comes down to the individual and if they're ready to do that. For me, like I have this like pendulum idea, right? Where you're kind of like somewhere in the middle, but you stress yourself out, you go to one side of the pendulum, and then you're like, crap, I need to relax, right? So then you jump to the other side, and then it's like, whoa, I don't know, like you're just kind of like bouncing back and forth. And then you find that, okay, there is an equilibrium where we can rest and stress and have a good balance of the two. And we can perceive that stress as good stress, and we can ensure that we're taking care of our mental health and all that good stuff. And we're in the middle. But that doesn't mean that something isn't going to come along and throw off that balance. And then you're back in that swing of the pendulum. And I think that that's like a misconception of burnout, is that you just like fix it and it's done. Like, no, it's just that it's giving you these warning signals that you need to make decisions, based on kind of what you're feeling, what what you've experienced, and use yourself as that guide. So yeah, definitely. If they're not being stimulated, then I think that there's none of that good stress either. Stress can be very good. And there's a lot of studies showing that the way that we look at stress is how well we manage it. So if we say, hey, I just got this puppy, it's so stressful, I can't go anywhere because this puppy is taking over my life, versus this puppy brings me so much happiness. And now, I have a new challenge of taking care of another life, but I am working through it and I'm learning in the process. I'm becoming a better person. Like, I look at that as a good stress. So it really just depends on how you're perceiving the world in front of you. And that is something that takes time and dedication to building those different wires more or less in your brain. Neuroplasticity is amazing because we can change the way that we think and the way that we see the world. And so a lot of times with my clients, like, I do walk through cognitive behavioral therapy lessons, even though I don't tell them that, I'm like, this is what I want you to do. And this is like, and then they come back and they're like, wow, that was really hard. Or like, I can see how that's making a difference. And it's just these baby steps that kind of get you moving in the direction of where you want to be, so that you don't feel that like, I'm burnt out and there's no creativity or nothing.
That was an awesome answer. There's so many questions I have now. One, maybe I'm reading into this in maybe an incorrect way, but it sounds like there's two dimensions that you may score burnout on. One is simply kind of a physical exertion or mental exertion level, where it's like you've got that pendulum. You could be overexerted, or you could be underfulfilled and underexerted, but you want that sweet spot in the middle. But then you mentioned something around perception and the idea of like good and bad stress. So like you can have a dog and, there's a ton of stress, but like seemingly you want the dog, and that's part of like your mission, so to speak. Like you have chosen this path and this stress. So like, therefore it's a good lens that you're looking through. So it's like, if you're learning chess, you don't want to be bored. You don't want to play against opponents who you're just going to crush. And you also don't want to play against grandmasters if you're just starting out. You want that like good level of exertion. But then on a different dimension, it's like, well, do you even want to play chess? Are you playing like a totally different game? Because let's say the stress is not from a dog. Let's say it's from a job that you don't actually like, and a company whose purpose you don't align with. Like, is there any amount of like, pendulum optimization that can make that worthwhile? Or am I reading into this the right way? Like, there's kind of like what you're doing and then how you're doing it.
Yeah, I think these are great questions. And the way I look at it, and the way that I've been trained to look at it, I guess, is that like, there is two types of stress. There's eustress and distress, right? So eustress is like the positive, distress is like, oh, that's awful. So, when you enter a scenario that's stressful, you can say, okay, is this going to be a positive thing or a negative thing? And you can kind of set that standard walking into it, but sometimes things come up and you don't know about it, right? Like, animal gets sick, but I'm around animals right now. So a lot of animal analogies, but animal gets sick and it's just awful. Like, you have to realize that they might not be with you. Right. So then there's like a deeper level of introspection, I think, that happens that helps fulfill that deeper meaning, right? So like, there's this term called post-traumatic growth, and it's when people who experience PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and their bodies are put into fight or flight, like unwillingly, it's like they freeze up, or maybe that have outlashes, however it shows up for the individual. There's about 10% of people that take that post-traumatic stress and they turn it into growth. And I think it has a lot to do with locus of control, how much you look at the world and say, I'm living this life and I'm doing that. And that's very difficult to do in a very stressed state. But that locus of control, I think, is a measure, another dimension, another measure of how we can look at, are we living our lives, or are we being told how to live our lives? And a lot of people, I think, in growth are in the former of we're leading the charge, right? Because they kind of have to plan for it. They have to say, okay, here are the inputs, here are the outputs. This is what we're learning along the way. It's a process, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I don't know if that fully answered the question.
Yeah, totally. Well, what you just said reminded me of two, I guess, philosophical frameworks that I like. Stoicism. So I read a lot of that right after college, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca kind of stuff, where a lot of their message. Yeah, right. It wasn't too bad. Yeah. They have cool messages around perception, right? It's not the object or the event. It's kind of your perception of it. So I love that. A lot of mindset stuff here. Also Viktor Frankl, logotherapy. Like there's a lot of this idea of like, it's not the thing itself. It's like kind of the meaning that you imbue on it and like your sense of control over it. And I think in flow, about the flow state, I think that's one of these big ideas too, is like how much control do you have over your like effort and output and stuff like that. So the mindset stuff seems very, very difficult and very long-term, right? So that's, I'm sure, why you're walking through cognitive behavioral therapy questions. But I want to ask like a cheater question. I want to ask like, are there shorter term things you can do? Like if you find yourself, let's say completely hypothetically, just for the sake of story, let's say I'm exhausted today. Let's say I just spent a week, drank too much at a Jimmy Buffett concert in Aspen. I drove back for 2 days and I tried to work while I was driving. Let's just say hypothetically, this is the case with me. I'm not saying it's true. So I've gotten less sleep, just a little tired today, trying to get back into work. What do I do?
Take a nap.
So just rest for a little bit, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I'm speaking from a place of having gone through years of figuring out how to have my own work-life balance. And I'm at the point where I value my time and my rest and my recovery so much. I look at it as a healing journey. Like if you get to that point of burnout in your life, you need to address it. You need to acknowledge it. Sometimes you can't do it right away. Like I love this example that I have for myself because I'm like, I look back and I'm like, I'm so proud that I was able to do that. Like, how was I able to do it? And when I look at growth, when I was at Growth Hackers, I had like just launched a website product and then we had the conference. And the week before the conference, when I have all of these to-dos, like just to-dos that I need to do that I know need to get done. And they're small things like getting stickers printed, whatever, but like, just, you got to get them done. There's a lot of details. I went to get away because I was like, I need a vacation before, I need like a breath of fresh air before this chaos. And I got hit with a migraine and I was on top of a mountain and I got hit with a migraine and I was just like, are you kidding me? Right. So my brain really told me like, no, you're going to have to pay attention to this. You have to, and then, I was like, I got to get through this next week and month or whatever. And coincidentally, like I ended up, after I met you, like by the way, we had a great time at the Growth Hackers conference. And then afterwards you invited me to a campfire. And that was like exactly what I needed in that moment, that nice little rest recovery session afterwards, some awesome friends. But I found that afterwards, I had a chance to get away. I went to Breckenridge and I just was like, something's got to change. I don't know what it is, but I need to at least give myself that space to think about it and think about what those changes could be. And when I got back to Orange County, which is where I was living, I went to the Korean spa, which has like, a plethora, like just like a handful of different saunas, hot baths, cold baths, everything. And so I just like sweat everything out. And then I said, okay, great. Now I'm going to journal. And I found this prompt. At the time I was listening to Rand Fishkin's Lost and Founder, and he was emphasizing the importance of core values. So I said, I'll do a core values exercise, whatever. We'll figure this out. And it was just like so clear to me that I was living in like 3 of those values that I came up with, but like there were 3 that I just like was totally neglecting. And it just became so clear that that was exactly why I was burning out. I wasn't addressing half of my life that I knew were important to me. So I started reframing the way that I approached work. Community is a very important metric for me, or value, not even a metric. I don't even know how you quantify it. But it's really important to me. And I found that, like, okay, in that process, I can say, I'm going to look at all of the metrics of this startup that is, we're trying to find product market fit. We're not at that point of growth yet, but we're struggling. It's hard. And I can say, I'm going to tie myself to those metrics, or I can say, I'm going to help a person every single day, right? Because helping a person every single day makes me feel good. It's aligned to my values. And so I got through the next 6 months of Growth Hackers knowing that, and it was great. Like, I loved that time that I had, like, not closing down a business, but selling a business is fascinating. There was so much to learn in that. And so I was able to flip the script. And that's what, I think is very important, is being able to take a step back, relax, get out of that fight or flight, get out of that chronic stress state that you're probably in if you're just running all the time, and say, what are the questions I need to ask myself? How do I move forward knowing that I can reframe the situation that I'm in, but I have to choose to do that. And so sometimes I do think it's impactful to just get someone to help you with that. And that's why I love Growth Mentor. Like, anybody is welcome after this podcast to schedule a call with me. Like, I'd love to, figure that out, or help you figure that out. Like, I'm a cheerleader, but everybody needs a cheerleader. And especially if you're in a dark place or you're in a super stressed place, like, our natural tendency is to look at everything as a threat when we are stressed. And so that means any new idea that comes up, like, you might have teammates that are like, oh gosh, they discount everything I say. Yeah, because they're stressed. But when you see past that stress, you can see, oh, okay, we just need to get them into, like, a relaxed state and then have this conversation, which is obviously easier said than done. But I think that bring that awareness to the table is very important.
Yeah. So I was actually going to mention that. I'm glad you said easier said than done, because to me, it's pretty clear when I get, like, a good night's sleep, like 8 hours, and I've got, like, time in the day to process emotion and, like, have fun and, meet friends. I feel better and my work is better through that. But then, that's, like, the simple part of it. It's like, take a step back, rest, reflect, and basically, like, re-enter once you're in a good place. But it's difficult because I don't know. I don't want to speak for my co-founders, but David and Ali also seemingly have this problem, and we have to remind each other constantly. And we've come up with this framework that, paradoxically, if you don't rest and relax and recover, you're robbing yourself of greater work that you could have done if you had done that. So, like, we had to reframe it for ourselves, because I think we're all kind of type A, perfectionist driven people, that the productive thing to do is to rest. But before that, it would feel bad. It's like, well, I've got to, talk to this prospect or do this podcast. I've got to, like, do these 3 meetings. And, like, there was all these kind of obligations running in the back of the mind. But then if you're not your full self, it's like telling yourself to take that moment, right, so you can rest, recover, and actually return the better version. That's how we had to frame it. So I guess, like, I don't know if this is a question per se, but I guess, like, how do you take that idea that you should take a step back and actually get someone to do it who's maybe a little prone to this, driven workaholic mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always will say, like, it comes down to the individual. They need to recognize that there needs to be a change, whether it's getting a migraine or just being frustrated with their teammates or not seeing the results they want, whatever it is, there needs to be some kind of signal, because otherwise, it's like when the student's ready, the teacher appears, right? And I wholeheartedly believe in that statement, because I can even look back in my own life and be like, nope, wasn't ready for that lesson, and then, like, oh, I was ready then. Like, that's okay. We all learn at our different paces, and that's fine. I think when it comes to a team, it's really important to kind of check in with each other and have that trust to be able to say, like, hey, is everything all right? Or, like, hey, I know your personality and you're not doing the things that are good for you. Right. And that takes time. And, like, obviously I think it's easier at smaller companies or smaller teams, because you can build those relationships. But I love the framework that my brother has too, that he uses at his work, which is, if one of his teammates is stressed out, they've gone through and they've done, like, their Enneagrams and all kinds of personality assessments. It's just like they're bonding. I don't know. They love it. But My brother, like they change their names if they're stressed. If one of them can point it out, so they'll say like, instead of Kevin, it's Mevin, right? Like, oh, there's Mevin again. Like, can you let us know when Kevin's here? And it's just like a friendly, like soft way to say like, hey, dude, get some rest, or like figure out what you need to do so you're not in a state. And I don't know. I think we just need to kind of be a little bit more creative with how we approach it, because at the end of the day, we are programmed to work. Like that is what our society has made of us. And so it's a reconditioning to not think that way, right? Most of our parents have worked very hard to get to where they are. And they, it's just hard work was what took it. It took hard work to get wherever you wanted to go. And so that was instilled on me. And I'm sure a lot of people in these newer generations of like, you need to work hard, but no one's ever talking about like, well, what about smarter work? And what about like more productive or more efficient, or, like there are other qualifiers. And so when we start looking through these different lenses, okay, how will I be most productive? Well, it's not actually working hard all the time. It's taking a break so that when I come back, I can be even stronger. And so I think it's really helping people to understand the value of what rest can bring. And that's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah, you had a cool point on the alternative names. I like that as an idea. I might steal that, but also to this idea of like bringing in accountability, external feedback, and support, I think is incredibly helpful for someone like me who has trouble understanding and like feeling when I'm burnt out. So having like that external feedback loop is pretty important. We started doing something in our weekly team meetings with the agency. I think I borrowed this from Brene Brown on a Tim Ferriss podcast. She was talking about this exercise she does with her husband, I believe, where they check in once in a while and tell each other their energy levels, because they're not going to be 50-50, or neither of them are going to be 100% energy at all times. So the idea is that if somebody's at a 70 and somebody's at a 30, they can balance each other out, right? And if they're both at like a 20, it's like, oh shit, we've got to rest this week and like change some stuff up. But it's kind of an accountability metric. It's kind of a collaboration metric to say like, here's where I'm at and here's where I could use some help. So we started to do this energy level thing at our weekly check-ins, and I found that to be pretty cool. Because then, sometimes you don't even realize how tired somebody is, and they're like, oh, I'm 10% this week, and you're like, oof, all right, cool. So where can I help you, right?
Definitely. And I've realized in this past, whatever year and a half, or really just like in the past year since I started working with the clients that I'm working with, it's like, there's a lot more grace, and sometimes people just don't feel like they have the permission to take it, right? Of saying, hey, my cat passed away. I need a day to myself just to grieve this, right? Like, or my parent's sick. I'm really worried. I need to do whatever I can to check in on them. Like, people understand, like they do. And if they don't understand, like, come talk to me. We'll find you a team that will understand, because people that care about you, like they want you to be well. And they know that like that means sometimes taking a day off, whether that's for mental health, physical health, or just like, family matters, like stuff happens. And that's where I think like also a lot of the personality stuff comes up, because some people can like just bury this stuff and they're really good at burying it, right? Like the low emotionality people who are just like can carry the weight of the world on their shoulders and they don't even realize it until it's like far too gone, of like, oh, I've spent the last 5 years doing something I didn't want to do because I don't have those signals to say, hey, you should be doing something different. Like they're not as strong for me, or I haven't been able to listen to them, or whatever that is. So I think that personality is like something you cannot discredit for a team member, because that 10% for someone might look like a 10% or like a 90% to someone else, and so it's really important to just think about the individual in addition to all these metrics that we're getting back.
Yeah, as someone who grew up in the Midwest, I definitely know a lot of people who fit that persona. How did you get into this world? I don't know how to define the world of like, I guess, recovery, personal growth, healing. So I don't know if there's some like term used to wrap it up, but like, what was your introduction here?
I wish that there was a term that I could explain what I do. Growth, I mean, is probably the best, but it's obviously multifaceted. in terms of like the psychometric stuff, so I worked at a company called Payoff in Orange County when I guess I just moved out there, and working remote when I first moved to California was not a good thing. So I found a company, worked at Payoff, awesome company. Like I met so many great people. One of them was Dr. Galen Buckwalter. So he was the former chief science officer of eHarmony, and he's a psychometrician. So he basically looks at how can we measure different personality, different psychological traits in people. So, I talked about locus of control earlier. That's another measure that people can be measured on.
Is this like Big Five and stuff like that as well?
Right. So Big Five, Ocean Framework, those are great, repeatable, different personality assessments. And then Hexaco is like a newer version of Big Five. Hexaco stands for honesty, humility, emotionality, extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to experience. And the idea is that you are dominant in like one or two traits. So whether you're high or low, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's just where you're at kind of on the scale. And then for each of those 6 dimensions, there are 4 subdimensions. And so there's 30 variables that have been done by factorial analysis across all cultures, all genders, all just any languages even. So all of that basically gets funneled down into what makes humans humans. Like what are the attributes that makes them humans? And then that's what they use to measure people across the world with this scale. And so I've used this for the past 5 years. When I was at Payoff, we had the Payoff financial personality assessment. So we did use Ocean back then. And we could see like everybody that was coming in, everybody in the company, what their personalities were. And that led our conversation, right? So if you're a storyteller, if you're high extroversion, like you want to chat, right? But if you're low extroversion, then you're probably someone that just wants all the details. And you're like, give me, let's get on with this. I just need the email. Let's go. So it tells you a lot about kind of where people are at. But obviously, psychometrics can be taken into a very dark place. It can be used to manipulate people. If people aren't aware of how they're being tested for their personality, then that just means that someone else is getting that information and you have zero idea about it. So like if we look back to 2016, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, all of the Disney princess quizzes and all of that, they were just harboring a bunch of our personality information. So then that they could, it's brilliant really when you think about it, but it's disturbing because then they could say, let's target all of the people that are high emotionality, right, with whatever ad they want to. And then that's going to fuel the flame. People are going to react because they're the emotional people. And then it looks like to the rest of the world, oh my gosh, this is our life, right? We only see 2 sides, and it's really just the 10% of the people that are very emotional, right? That's not the full world, but it looks like the full world because that's how social media kind of happens. But anyway, I started understanding what psychometrics were. And then I moved into growth, which I think I've always really been a growth hacker or whatever you want to, growth leader. Since I left college, when I was doing online fundraising for nonprofits in the beginning of my career, it was all about experimentation and testing. So I just assumed that that's what marketers did. I didn't realize that there was a whole term for it. And then I figured that out. And then I was like, okay, this is fun. We can grow companies, but what about the sustainability part? Like, are we focusing on the right missions here and all that good stuff? And then, oh, wait, like these people that are burning out, like they're not passionate about what they're doing. Like, let's figure out how we can get them passionate about what they're doing and like give them the support for that. So it's really been an evolution. I'm a principles person. I like to look at what is the truth and build from there instead of kind of speculating. And a lot of this, believe it or not, has led me down to the path of like where our food comes from. And so that's like more of a personal interest and hobby now. I don't do it to make money because I want it to be a passion. I don't want it to be something that I have to rely on for money, at least right now. It might change in the future, but I'm learning everything I can about growing food, where it comes from, what nutrients are important, how our soil's being stripped of nutrients. And so that's why we have to start supplementing. And can we get away from these supplements? Like there's a lot of these questions floating around, but yeah, you see what I mean? There's no term to like going all that.
You're working with growing food. Weren't you working on a farm or something like that recently?
Yeah, so about three, I mean, maybe with a puppy now, probably like 2 or 3 times a year. I've been going out to Ohio. So I had met a couple who was woofing. So woofing stands for working on a farm or working on an organic farm. And that is, they were doing that in Croatia when I was living there. And I met them randomly at a grocery store. I helped them check out their produce because the system was different in Croatia and they didn't, they weren't speaking Croatian. And we just met, became friends while traveling. And then they moved back to Ohio where they were from and started a farm with like a grant that they had received, or not a grant, but it was like a city program where they could lease the land for 10 years at a discounted rate to be able to start a farm because they wanted to keep, it was under a conservancy that they wanted to keep the land being farmed. So they started farming in, I guess it was like 2 years ago now. And I started going out there in November of last year, randomly kind of reconnected with them and have been going out there. I mean, the last time that I was there, I helped, it was definitely very eye-opening, but I helped process some pigs. Like I took them to the butcher first day there, just like experiences that I just had never put myself into. And it's been really fascinating just to see like my own growth with my relationship to food and to feel so much better when I have the right nutrients, I think is fundamentally where a lot of people are struggling. Because our microbiome and the health of our gut is directly tied to how well we feel. And so, I went through a spout recently over the summer and I was like, you know what, I'm fixing this microbiome. We're doing it. So I went to the GAPS diet, which stands for gut and psychology syndrome. So this diet is pretty much bone broth to start, and then you make it yourself, and then you start adding vegetables and meats and everything grass fed, 100% organic, all that good stuff. And after 30 days, I was a completely different person. Like I could feel it. So I know the power and the healing power really of food, and so that's what fires me up now. It's all and it is growth. Like you cannot try to grow something and not have growth involved, right? There's so many intricacies in terms of growing food, and with climate change, it becomes even more intricate. So just being able to have my fingers in dabbling with some of that is awesome. And yeah, I think that also farming or gardening, anything like that is a great complement to remote work because, if we're behind these computers, like being able to get outside and be in touch with nature is a very healing and therapeutic thing to do.
I would love to do something like this. First off, this sounds incredible. And generally the idea of getting away from my laptop is super, super appealing to me nowadays. The less time I spend online, the better after this pandemic. But something interesting I was thinking about is you've got kind of multiple dimensions to your personal brand online. And I hate to call it personal brand, but you talk about this stuff.
Baby.
You talk, it's just you, but you talk about, your farming and growing food. You talk about recovery and burnout. You talk about growth. You've got multiple angles here. And I guess like the converse, right? Like I know people who are very constructed personal brands. Like they think about everything they put out. It's designed to have a certain tonality. It's designed to like push something specific, and they kind of eliminate those other areas of their life. So I guess I wanted to ask if you've ever thought about constructing like a personal brand, or is this something that because you do, you have an online presence, like people know you, people follow you. Have you ever thought about constructing that consciously, or is it just something that, you lead with passion, you lead with what you're interested in and just kind of talk about those things?
Yeah, obviously I have my core values. And so that's like important to me. And I write about that and that journey and everything. But for me, like I'm always like after the flashy object, or I don't even call it a flashy object. It's just like, once I learn something, then it dives me deeper down another path. And so, when I first left my full-time job after that burnout experience I was telling you about, it was like yoga's a thing, right? And like, yoga's going to be my all. And then I'm like, I've learned enough since then to realize like, no, like you just have these different facets of your life. And so it's okay to talk about them, and you don't need to be like this one's on brand, this one's not on brand. Like I am who I am. And so now I lead with just like, this is what I've got going on now. And if you want to follow along, cool. If not, that's cool too. Like I don't, I've been such a strong believer in the power of community since I can remember really. And maybe it's just that sense to belong or the more I've learned, the more I've realized how isolation can kill you and it's just awful. And so like community is so important and networking and all of that. And so for me, like it fits my personality and that is how I get my work. I don't get my work through my personal brand. Like I'm not worried about conversions. I'm not worried about all of that. If I was like, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't want to do it. It'd be another task. Right. But now like, it'll be like my birthday or something. I'm like, I want to write, so then I write and it's just like an avenue for that. So I've definitely been a much more intuitive person when it comes to my personal brand and just kind of letting my recent endeavors lead the way.
Mm-hmm. There's two things that came to mind. One, this concept, we actually wrote it down as a guiding principle for our agency. This should be fun. So if we're ever doing something where we completely hate it, where it's like not, business crucial or something, there's going to be things we don't like doing our taxes or something. But if we're doing sales and we're doing services and we completely hate our lives, we got to stop and question why we're doing it. This should be fun as such a guiding principle. So I like that you said that. I've thought a lot about that with my personal brand, so to speak, as well. I don't want to do things I don't want to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But also,
how lucky are we that we can say that?
I know, right? It is a great position to be in, but there's also like dilemmas that I go through, which is like, I run a content agency. So should I stop talking about conversion rate optimization, or should I, just shield the other aspects of my life that I like to put out there and just focus on this content thing? Because business wise, that may be the best thing. But then there's this other idea that, the convergence of your unique dimensions, or the convergence of different dimensions of you, equal a unique person, right? So I think Naval Ravikant talked about this, kind of competing in an audience of one, or like in a field of one. Mm-hmm. And I think he used Joe Rogan as an example. He's like, he's a comedian, he's a podcaster, he's like a fighting commentator, and like nobody is like all of these things together. So he's not really competing with anyone. So I think when you do lead kind of authentically with whatever you want to do, you end up kind of being in an audience of one, which is kind of cool.
Yep. I mean, definitely not intentionally, but I think it was also like one of those things where I didn't really focus on my branding much besides, I mean, my name's easy to remember. So I guess that's like, I'm lucky there. But when I started thinking about time, or really when I started thinking like, and I wasn't just doing all the time and doing like task and all of these marketing things and creating the conference and all that good stuff. Like when I had time to sit back and say like, what's important to me, it's like, I want people to resonate with who I am, not with what I think I should be or anything, like I want people to say, you know what, I'm curious about sustainability as well. Like, let's have a conversation versus like growth at all costs. Like the growth at all costs were burning me out. Like, I was just like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, this is just not aligned with me. As soon as I started talking more about like the sustainable side of growth and rest and that kind of stuff, like people came out of the woodwork and they started DMing me, and it's just like, oh, I'm curious about this too, or this worked. And so it's created like its own little culture within itself. And I feel good about it because I'm like, if I can give someone permission to take a break, I know it's not going to be the end of their world, but it might change their world for the better. And so that's kind of been a personal mission of mine. I do have personal mission. Like my personal mission is to help people relax. And that was something that I figured out when I was in Greece, and I was just like, what do I want to do for the next 5 to 10 years? What would I be happy doing? Like, I can't nail down a specific thing, but if I'm helping people relax, like I'm using my talents and I'm also like doing something that I think is meaningful. And so how I help people relax is going to look different by the day. Like it's something that I can do on a day-to-day basis. Like I could call my mom up and that could be my one way that I help someone relax versus, leading a yoga class versus having friends over to play with the puppy, like there are so many different ways that I can help people relax, and they don't all have to be tied to money. Although some of them are, like when you start to uncover more about grief and that kind of stuff, you start to realize like you can't really relax until you kind of go through these things. And like, it sucks to go through them. But you can find some peace amidst it all. And so like, I don't know. It's just, one of those things I think that continues to evolve.
Yeah, I love that. Would you want to do a couple of rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. Who do you admire professionally and why?
Ooh. Let me think about this. I really do admire Foti and Jessica over at Growth Mentor. They've bootstrapped Growth Mentor from the beginning, and it was because they really wanted to make it impactful, and so they started small and worked really hard to get the start of the community with a lot of integrity and a lot of kindness, and then they've been able to foster that and cultivate it and grow it into over 300 mentors today. I think that takes a lot of guts in a day and age where it's very easy to get VC funding, or I wouldn't say it's very easy, but they've been offered, and so they've turned that down. So I really do admire people that are just taking it one day at a time and building it from the ground up. I think it's awesome.
Which talent would you most like to have?
Oh, I was going to say mind reading, but that would be awful.
It really would. High downside on that one.
I really wish I could play like a more intricate, like a guitar, ukulele. I say intricate, like obviously that's something that people have done pretty easily, but I don't have it.
I think you could. I think you could definitely pick up a guitar and learn pretty quickly.
I definitely spoke this to the wrong person because you're a guitar player.
We'll do a lesson. We'll do a virtual one.
That'd be fun.
Do you consider yourself more scientific or artistic?
Oh, that's good. I think that I kind of think they go hand in hand, because I think like science is the ability to like question things. In my mind, it's not like anything is truth. And I think that you kind of have to be a little artistic to say, what are the questions I should be asking? So I don't know, I'm a very inquisitive person. So it's I guess I would lean on scientific side. But my work is very much creative.
That's one of my favorite answers I've heard to that question. That was good.
Oh, cool.
If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Dead or alive? Probably Gandhi.
Mm-hmm. Good answer.
Just be like, what happened? How did that go? How did you make it through?
That would be fascinating. What do you consider the most overrated virtue?
Hard work.
I love that. Yeah. What's a career choice you considered but didn't pursue?
I always wanted to sell renewable energy. That's why I studied marketing and environmental studies. So I was going to sell renewable energy. So maybe one day.
Could still be in the future. Yeah.
A lot more options now.
For sure. What blogs, podcasts, and influencers do you like to follow right now?
I'm more on the books right now. I'm getting back into Brene Brown. I know she has a new one coming out. So I'm like, all right, always a good refresher. And then in terms of like what I'm following on social media, it's like all gardens and farms and how to get all these, I don't know, it's just like random hacks of gardening and whatnot, which I find teach me about other facets of life too. So it's good. It's good to like not be following something that I'm not like burnt out on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I find myself reading kind of fewer and fewer business books and more from very esoteric subjects, in my opinion. Reading this novel, I think maybe I might have mentioned this to you, but The Overstory, it's this novel all about trees right now.
How is it?
Completely different. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. I did this art exhibition it was like this immersive interactive thing in Miami. And the gift shop had a section of books that were all kind of the inspiration for the artist's creations.
Oh, cool.
So I just started picking them up. I'm like, I gotta figure out what went into this creation because it was so mind blowing. I need to find out what inspired this. So ton of stuff along that line. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap up here. And to finish off, where would you point people to find you online?
growthgal.com, or if you go to Growth Mentor, I'm one of the top mentors there. So you should be able to find me pretty easily. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Dani. This is great.